My sister didn't want my nephew, so I raised him as if he were my own son. Now, her daughter is jealous of her brother because they're so poor. There was a time when my sister 47F got pregnant with my nephew Luke. I was 18 years old at the time. Neither my sister nor her boyfriend at the time, who is now her husband, were interested in Luke when he was born, so I took care of him. My grandmother helped me, and she was an amazing support. She watched over him while I was in my last year of high school in return for me cleaning and cooking for her on the weekends. They weren't much of a help either. Luke only got about $100 a month, which, if you have a kid, you know isn't much. My grandma and I were the only ones who could care for him. I was kicked out with my nephew a year after high school because my parents, sister, and her husband no longer wanted to deal with us. My sister told me she wished she had never had him. I went right to my grandmother, and the three of us went to see a family law attorney. My sister and her husband gave me the rights to raise Luke as their own child, so I will now call him my son instead of my nephew. After that, I moved in with my grandma. She took care of my son while I went to community college and worked part-time. At times it was very hard, like when Luke was 6 and my grandma died. My grandmother gave me 90% of her things when she died. My parents and sister called me under fake pretenses to get back in touch and meet my son because of this event. When we got back together, it didn't last long though, and I told them they could either behave or never see us again. My dad made the choice to get back in touch with my son and me, and now we're close. My mom is nice to Luke, but she and I don't talk much. My sister and I both got pregnant when Luke was 8 years old. At that point, my sister decided she wanted my son back and began telling him that my husband and I would no longer love him once our real son came. To give you some background, my husband met Luke when he was 5. We had been together for a year before that. Luke is like a son to my husband. We got married when he was 7. He agreed to us adopting him when he was 9 years old. When Luke broke down crying one day and said he was afraid we would leave him when his little brother was born, we found out that my sister was sharing these hurtful ideas. We told him it would never happen after he told us what my sister and her husband had been saying. Luke knows he's not really my son, but he is definitely my son. I cut ties with my sister and her husband again after that, and I took my son to family and individual therapy. I told Luke that we still loved him when I finally gave birth to his little brother. When my sister called me again after about 2 years, I chose to keep in touch with her less, and my son and husband agreed. My sister and her husband sometimes have money problems, but my husband and I have plenty. My kids do things outside of school, get the gifts they want, and every summer we go on a big family trip. My sister and her husband, on the other hand, can't afford much. My sister started telling me that I needed to pay for things for my niece when she was about 9 years old. I told her that wasn't my job. My niece got the things she wanted, and I took her out sometimes, but it wasn't even close to how I treat my own kids. Now that my second boy is 17, my husband and I were talking about getting him a cheap first car, like we did for Luke when he turned 17. My niece is also turning 17 at the same time, and my sister told her she would get her a car. Anyway, my sister can't pay for one, so she asked me to buy it for her. I said no, telling her that I hadn't promised her a car and it wasn't my job to give her one. She got mad at me and wouldn't talk to me for a while. We gave my son a car as a gift for his 17th birthday. A few days later, my niece yelled and cried when she called me and asked why I hate her and can't treat her like her brother. Being calm, I told her that things were different, and that even though she was my sister, I couldn't give her the same things I gave my son. It was made clear that as an aunt, all I do is give birthday and Christmas presents and be there when it counts. I told her that her brother would always be more important to me than she is. Even though I explained calmly, before hanging up, my niece kept yelling and said I was being unfair. After that, my sister called to scold me for not doing more. I told her that nothing would have happened if she hadn't offered my niece a car or my money. People from my family and my sister's friends have been calling me for a few days now, and calling me mean names and other things. I feel bad because my kids did have more, and I guess I could have helped more. So am I a jerk for what I said to my niece? Please note that I will be calling my daughter Emily and my youngest son Justin to keep things in order. I chose to meet up with Emily 2 days after she called. We chose a park not far from my house as the place to meet. Emily seemed fine and a little tired when we met. I told her I was sorry if I hurt her, but she needs to know that it's not my job since I'm not her dad. That made sense to her, but she was angry that her brother and Justin got everything they wanted. For starters, I told her that Luke isn't her brother but her cousin because of how things went. Also, they have to work for what they want. They mostly stay out of trouble, do their homework, and get good grades. I then asked her why she was acting this way since she had never had a problem before. She broke down in tears and said it wasn't fair that Luke and Justin get everything they want and she doesn't get much. She said Luke was lucky to be adopted by my husband and me. She said she should have the same things my boys do, and that as a family member I need to take care of her too. She is part of my family, but she is not my kid, I told her. Her care is not my business, even though I love her. Then I asked her why she wasn't happy about it. She said she feels like she owes her folks everything, even though they take good care of her. She gets angry when she sees how Luke and Justin were raised because she thinks we don't see the boys as our duty. Her words, we are a family that helps each other, works through problems, and is always together. She was always angry that she had to leave, even though I stayed in her life and took her out with my family. She thought I should take her in because I took Luke in, so she felt like she was second. Even though I understand how she feels, I told her I wouldn't treat her like my child. I didn't raise her, but I love her. To get her a car or help her get one, it's their job. She became even more angry and told me it was clear I didn't care about her. Then she left. I told her through text that I cared about her, but I'm not her mom and it's not my job. I talked with my husband about calling my sister when I got home. She told me that my family and I are not going to talk to her at all. Then my sister asked me how I was going to get in touch with Emily. I told her Emily is almost 18 years old, so she can call me if she wants to. After that, she asked me to get Emily a car. That was not my job. I told her she should act like a mother, since that is her job. Emily wants her to be a mum, so I hung up the phone, stopped her and got rid of her number. My mum called me the next day. She thinks that if I'm not going to give Emily a car, I should buy one for her. I hung up the phone and told her I wasn't going to do that because it would only lead to a fight. Then I called my dad and told him what happened. He agrees with me. My dad called later to see if he could come over on Wednesday. He looked very upset when he got there. My mom gave my sister a lot of money from my parents' retirement fund. My dad had to pack his bags and stay in a hotel for a while because this made his and my mom fight so badly. Now, I don't talk to my sister or mom, and I'm not going to talk to my niece either. As of 2 weeks after the post, I chose to talk to Emily, and we agreed to meet at my house. I told everyone not to come home because I only wanted to talk to her. If she didn't want to look at me when she got here, I told her. May I give her a hug? She nodded, and she started crying as soon as I hugged her. It was unnecessary for her to say sorry for what she did, but she did. To find out more about what's going on, I asked her again how her parents treat her. She told me that her dad likes her and tries to spend time with her, but he has 2 jobs and is always busy. Even though my sister is home more, she doesn't like being bothered and stays to herself most of the time. Then I asked her if she thought she was being ignored, and she said no. They don't spend as much time together as they'd like because her parents fight a lot, mostly over money. She feels like she has to do what her mom says sometimes, but she knows they love her. I brought up the fact that she called Luke her brother and asked her if she really felt that way. She told me that she thinks of him as a cousin, but she thought that if she said he was her brother, I might want to help her. But when I asked her if she knew how I ended up adopting Luke, she said she did, and that her dad had told her. My sister seems to have sugarcoated it, while her dad told her the whole truth. We then talked about going on a fun day trip together every Saturday. She got excited and said that was something she'd really like. That weekend, we went to a restaurant she had been wanting to try and had a great time. We then went to a bookshop because she loves reading and I bought her a few books she wanted. I had to cancel Emily and my second weekend trip because Justin got sick and had to go to the hospital. He got hit hard during football practice, which knocked him out and made his asthma worse. It took place on Friday, and Justin was in the hospital until Sunday. Emily and I were going to go out on Saturday, but I called her in the morning to say I couldn't make it. She yelled at me and hung up the phone before I could explain why. She said I never cared about her. When I tried to call her back, the call went to voicemail. So I texted her to say I'm sorry I hurt her, but Justin was in the hospital and we could have our day next weekend. But I never heard back from her. We were having a family night out 2 days ago when my neighbors called to say that someone had broken into one of our cars and called the police. The police were there when we got home. It was Justin's car. The paint was chipped and scratched, and 2 of the windows were broken. When my husband and I looked at our security video, it was easy to see Emily and someone else damaging the car. Em and her friend were arrested the next morning after my husband gave the cops a copy of the video. My sister and mom yelled at me that I was hurting my niece's life and that I should drop the charges if I loved her. That's where we stand now. My husband is adamant that we don't drop the charges, and Justin and Luke agree with him.